I'm Steve Levi. I'm a freelance writer here in Alaska, and I'd like to introduce you to my poem, The Phantom Dogsled. The importance of The Phantom Dogsled is that it's a snapshot in the moment of time during the Alaska Gold Rush. The real boom times of the Alaska Gold Rush are between 1896 and 1910. The Phantom Dogsled starts in what is called the Alaskan interior. It takes place around what is today Fairbanks and Chena Hot Springs and those areas. During the winter, there was no way to get out of these little tiny villages without being on a dog sled. And if something went wrong, like a young girl being shot and you needed medicine, and the medicine wasn't in the village, the only way to get it was to get into a dog sled and travel 100 miles. And once you're on that dog sled, you're talking about temperatures at 60 below, you're talking about winds of 70 miles an hour, and you're talking about you cannot stop. You just have to keep going. The planes are ice-locked on the landing strip, and they're ice-locked in Fairbanks as well. The most important thing about, especially narrative poetry, you're going to choose a moment in time, and in that moment in time, everything that you talk about has to exist at that moment. Photographs make the history come alive. You have this other dimension of poetry that is not there when you just stand up and read it. So with The Phantom Dogsled, it's a narrative poem, but on top of that, it has rhyme. And the nice thing about rhyme is that once you get into the rhyme, it pulls you through the poem. I want you to go ahead and get something out of my poems that you didn't have before you started. Under 5 feet of snow, the Yukon still flowed in the cold snap of 1928, and the blue of the snow at 60 below lay fluffed as a ptarmigan's pate. There were sundogs by day that peeked through the spray of ice crystals swept in from the west, while at night the sky danced with a glory enhanced from Burnt Paw to Allakaket. Some miners in Gwich'in huddled inside their kitchen round the pot-bellied stove in Oak Rocker. There was Jerome and his wife, Billyboy with his lice, Julie and Benji and Walker. They stared at the flames and muttered vile names, keeping their thoughts off a grievin' for Sarah Jean Carroll, who'd caught a buck-laden barrel and fought for her life, barely wheezin'. Now all round the fire they vented their ire, yet the family and guests knew the score. That one had to go plow over the snow from Ramparts to Fairbanks. Once more he had to return with a doctor or learn how a layman could administer aid to a gut that's been sewn with a needle of bone and stitched with long hair tied in braids. At first they had waited as though it was fated that Sarah would pull through all right, but the gurgle of blood on her pillow did flood and trickled in streams quite a fright. The planes were all grounded, their front wheels had floundered where the cold snap had frozen them tight. Now all that was left, as the planes were bereft, was a long, lonely, cold dog sled ride. They all knew the wager, the price of a savior, and the snap of winter's cold whip, yet they all swore to go like the flight of a crow on this, the most holy of trips. And so they drew straws from Jerome's mighty paw to gamble the privilege to go, to race old man Winter with dog sleds and dinter, the crest of the virgin snow. Jerome drew the longest, and Benji's was strongest, but Walker's was long but was lean. And Billyboy tried to cover his pride when his was the shortest. It seemed that the threat of the trip in winter's stern grip and the perils of trail and of storm gave him no fear, and he said with a sneer, "By God, but it looks like I've won." Now older men know that the price of the snow is black lips and ice-frosted beard, And stoppin' means lyin', and lyin' means dyin', and always Nakani is steered through the frost-heavy woods or the frozen stream floods to the pant of a dog-tired team. It stalks the unwary, the fools are his quarry, as are the crippled, the weak, and the green. But the wheeze from the marrow sank like an arrow in Billy's heart covered with fur, where it throbbed in his chest as it did in her breast, and his need to be off made him stir. From his seat by the fire, in the smoke of the briar, stilling the rage in his soul, he sprang to his feet, this bold athlete, and into the bedroom he strolled. Bending over the bed where the blood trickled red, whistling strains of sweet Molly McGee, he kissed her hot cheeks and nose like a beak, and then he knelt down on his knees for the help of the one who gave his own son as a martyr to those who would care to challenge the wind or the mob's awesome grin, and those with the courage to dare. Then he tethered his dogs and fastened his togs. With jerky he piled his sled high, and he whistled that tune in the light of the moon as the stars twinkled high in the sky. Like a hurricane's spire, the northern lights' fire filled the sky with green and with rose, and Billyboy gambled with the draw of the bramble with that straw that he broke when he chose. With a yell he was off in the snow and the frost, and yet as he vanished from sight, it seemed that the flakes an aura did make which encircled him in this mad flight. Then the hush of the wind in winter's grim grin rooted about in the trees, and the last that they heard, like the wail of a bird, were the strains of sweet Molly McGee. In 3 days the storm, with the speed of a worm, crawled west toward Nome's Norton Sound, and a flight from the city on an errand of pity skidded weird on the ice-covered ground, with a doctor aboard for the child who'd been gored by the blast of the gun-cotton beast. But the effort was late, for the child had a date, and at last her wheezing did cease. Jerome and his wife cried into the night, alone round the pot-bellied fire, for the child that was gone and the hope that was spawned, and now the flame seemed but a pyre. And together they waited to tell of the fated, a task which gave them no joy, to bear bitter tidings to the one who'd been driving the dogs, the young Billyboy. For 2 weeks they waited, and waited and waited, and Billy still hadn't arrived. And the days they grew longer, and the light ever stronger, and the green buds on the ground did strive to grow through the slush of winter's last muck, to reach for the springtime sun. And when the ice broke, neither one spoke, for they knew Billyboy'd never come. Now the days of the dogs and wolverine togs are tales of the Northland's twilight, and the roar of the snow goes, shatter the snow, and professors now ponder the lights. But sometimes they say, when the howl and the spray of winter has died in the trees, a phantom sled glides and a ghost aboard rides, wheezing strains of sweet Molly McGee.
With whiskey and nuggets she howls at the moon, Turiampoliolioliam, Turiampoliolioliam.
Out there every day there are people doing heroic things because they choose to do it, and they have to do it, and they do it well. I hope that you walk away with an understanding that Alaska is completely different than the rest of the country. And it was completely different during the Alaska Gold Rush, and many of the same problems that the Phantom Dogsled talks about, we still have here in Alaska. When it comes to the winter in these smaller communities, they are stuck. Thank you very much for listening to the Phantom Dogsled, and please read your history.